The courthouse steps felt colder than they should have in late September. Gabriel Knight stood there, briefcase in hand, watching his entire life's work evaporate into the autumn air like morning fog. For $0.8 million. The number kept repeating in his mind like a broken record, each iteration feeling more surreal than the last. He'd built Knight Security Solutions from nothing, a one-man operation working out of a cramped apartment 12 years ago, surviving on ramen noodles and determination. Now it was a thriving firm with 43 employees, contracts with major corporations, and a reputation that had taken blood, sweat, and countless sleepless nights to establish. And Judge Harrison had just handed half of everything to Vanessa, plus spousal support that would bleed him dry for the next decade. Gabriel. The voice came from behind him, gravelly and worn. He turned to see Richard Crane, Vanessa's father, standing at the base of the courthouse steps. The old man looked different, thinner, grayer, with eyes that held something Gabriel couldn't quite identify. Regret, perhaps, or shame. Mr. Crane. Gabriel's voice was flat, emotionless. He had nothing left to give, not even anger. Richard climbed the steps slowly, each one seeming to cost him effort. In his weathered hands, he held a manila envelope, the kind that might contain old photographs or forgotten documents. I need 5 minutes of your time. Gabriel almost laughed. Your daughter just took everything I've worked for. What could you possibly have to say to me? The truth. Richard's hand trembled slightly as he extended the envelope. Something I should have given you 3 years ago when I first found out. I'm a coward, Gabriel. I chose my daughter over doing what was right. But watching what happened in that courtroom today, I can't carry this anymore. The envelope felt heavier than it should have. Gabriel looked at the old man's face. Really looked, and saw tears gathering in the corners of his eyes. Richard Crane was a retired Marine, a man who'd built Crane Industries into a manufacturing empire through sheer willpower and iron discipline. Gabriel had never seen him cry. Not at his own wife's funeral. Not ever. What is this? Open it when you get home. Read everything. Then decide what you want to do. Richard's voice cracked. I failed you, son. I failed the man my daughter married, the good man she didn't deserve. Maybe this can't fix what was done today, but it's the truth. And you deserve at least that much. Before Gabriel could respond, Richard turned and walked away, his shoulders hunched as if carrying an invisible weight. Gabriel stood there, envelope in hand, watching the old man disappear around the corner. The autumn wind picked up, scattering leaves across the courthouse plaza like confetti at the world's saddest celebration. Gabriel's apartment, he couldn't call it home anymore, felt cavernous and empty. Vanessa had already taken most of the furniture from their real house, the 4-bedroom colonial in Oakmont Heights that would soon belong to her as well. This temporary rental was just a place to sleep while the divorce proceedings ground through the legal system like a slow-motion car crash. He set the envelope on the kitchen counter and stared at it for 20 minutes, afraid of what it might contain. Finally, he poured himself 2 fingers of bourbon, a rare indulgence, and opened it. Inside were printouts, dozens of them. Bank statements, text message transcripts, emails, photographs. Gabriel's hands began to shake as he read the first page, then the second, then the 10th. The bourbon sat forgotten, growing warm in the glass. Text messages between Vanessa and her sister, dated 2 years before the marriage. Mom's life insurance just cleared, $2.3 million. But Dad's controlling it all. The only way I can access real money is through marriage. Gabriel's business is perfect, successful but not too successful. He'll work himself to death building it, and I'll own half. Preparing and narrating this type of story took us long efforts and hard work. So if you are enjoying the story, please consider subscribing to our channel. Emails to her divorce attorney, dated 6 months into the marriage. Continue documenting everything. We need to wait until Knight Security hits at least $8 million valuation before filing. The longer I stay, the more I'm entitled to. Bank statements showing monthly transfers from a secret account Vanessa maintained. Money she'd been siphoning from their joint accounts and hiding, building a war chest for the divorce she'd been planning since before they'd even said, I do. But the worst was a video file on a USB drive tucked into the envelope. Gabriel's laptop took a moment to load it, and when it did, he wished he'd never opened Richard's envelope at all. It was Vanessa, at what looked like a private club, date-stamped 8 months ago. She was laughing, champagne glass in hand, surrounded by well-dressed women Gabriel didn't recognize. One of them asked, "Don't you feel guilty? He seems like such a sweet guy." Vanessa's laugh was sharp, cutting. "Gabriel? He's useful. He works 16-hour days building that little security company while I maintain the perfect wife image. In another year, maybe 2, I'll file. Take half of everything he's built, plus support payments. My lawyer says we're looking at a minimum 4 million, possibly 6 if the business keeps growing. Then I'm free to live the life I actually want." "What about love?" another woman asked. "Love?" Vanessa's smile was cold. "Love is a fairy tale for poor people. I watched my mother waste her life loving my father, living on his terms, asking permission to spend money she helped him earn. Then she died, and what did she have to show for it? A grave and a life insurance policy. I learned from her mistakes. You marry for assets, divorce for freedom, and live for yourself. Gabriel was always just a stepping stone." Gabriel closed the laptop, his hands shaking so badly he nearly knocked it off the table. The apartment walls seemed to close in around him. Every memory of their marriage, her encouraging smiles when he worked late, her support during difficult negotiations, her patience when deals fell through. All of it recontextualized in an instant. None of it had been real. He'd been a mark from the beginning, a target selected for exploitation. His phone buzzed. A text from Marcus, his business partner and best friend since college. "Just heard about the ruling. I'm so sorry, man. Coming over. Don't do anything stupid." Gabriel looked around the empty apartment. Cardboard boxes lined the walls, filled with the remnants of a life he'd thought was real. His wedding photo sat on top of one box. He'd been smiling like he'd won the lottery. Vanessa's smile, he now realized, was the expression of someone who had. Marcus arrived 30 minutes later with Thai food and another bottle of bourbon. He took one look at Gabriel's face and set both down on the counter. "What happened? You look worse than you did leaving the courthouse." Gabriel handed him the envelope without a word. Marcus read through the documents, his expression darkening with each page. When he got to the video, his jaw clenched so tight Gabriel could hear his teeth grinding. "This is evidence of fraud," Marcus said quietly. "This changes everything. We can file an appeal, get the divorce settlement overturned. Gabriel, this is proof of actual malicious intent from before the marriage even began. No judge would uphold that settlement once they see this." Her father knew. Gabriel's voice sounded hollow to his own ears. "He knew for 3 years and said nothing. He watched her plan this, execute it, and drain me in court. He only gave me this today because his conscience finally caught up with him." Marcus set the papers down carefully, as if they might explode. "Okay, here's what we're going to do. Tomorrow morning we call James Reardon. He's the best divorce attorney in the state. We filed an emergency motion to freeze all assets from the settlement, citing newly discovered evidence of fraud. We get a new hearing, present all of this, and we bury her. And if she destroys her credibility publicly, drags this through the mud?" Gabriel asked. "Then she destroys her credibility publicly. She committed fraud, Gabriel. She married you under false pretenses with the explicit intent to steal your assets. That's not just unethical, it's criminal. The court will see that." Gabriel wanted to believe him, but 12 years of building a business had taught him that justice and the law weren't always the same thing. What if it's not enough? What if they say it's just hearsay or inadmissible or... "Stop." Marcus gripped his shoulder firmly. "We fight. That's what we do. You didn't build night security by giving up when things got hard. Remember the Langford contract? Everyone said we'd never land a Fortune 500 client. You worked for 8 months straight, barely sleeping, refining our pitch until it was perfect. And we got it. This is no different. But it felt different. Business was about logic, strategy, measurable outcomes. This was personal, raw, a betrayal that cut deeper than any failed contract ever could. Over the next 3 days, Gabriel barely slept. James Reardon reviewed every document, watched the video a dozen times, and built a case that he promised would make legal history. They filed the emergency motion on Thursday morning. The hearing was scheduled for the following Tuesday. Vanessa's response came through her attorney that same afternoon. A cease and desist letter threatening to sue Gabriel for defamation, invasion of privacy, and emotional distress if he pursued the appeal. She claimed the documents were fabricated, the video was deepfaked, and her father was suffering from early-stage dementia and couldn't be trusted as a reliable source. "She's good," Reardon admitted, reading the letter in his oak-paneled office. "Attacking your credibility, discrediting her father, making you the aggressor. Classic defense strategy when you're caught red-handed. So what do? We authenticate everything. I've already hired a digital forensics expert to verify the video. We'll subpoena Vanessa's sister. Those text messages were sent from her phone too. And we'll get medical records for Richard Crane to prove he's mentally competent. She wants a war? We'll give her one." The courtroom was packed on Tuesday morning. Word had spread through the legal community about the Knight case, a divorce settlement being challenged with evidence of premeditated fraud. Several attorneys sat in the gallery, watching like spectators at a particularly vicious sporting event. Judge Harrison looked annoyed to be reconsidering her own ruling. Vanessa sat at the plaintiff's table looking immaculate in a navy suit, her blonde hair perfect, her expression one of wounded innocence. She'd always been good at performing. Reardon stood and began methodically. "Your Honor, we have obtained evidence that fundamentally alters the nature of these proceedings. Evidence that proves Mrs. Knight, then Miss Crane, entered into this marriage with fraudulent intent, for the explicit purpose of extracting assets from Mr. Knight's business." Vanessa's attorney objected immediately. "Your Honor, this is a desperate attempt to avoid a legally binding settlement. The so-called evidence is unverified and—" "I'll hear the evidence," Judge Harrison interrupted, her eyes sharp. "Proceed, Mr. Reardon." The digital forensics expert testified first, confirming the video's authenticity. No signs of manipulation, deepfake technology, or editing beyond basic compression for storage. The metadata matches the claimed date and location. "In my professional opinion, this video is genuine." Vanessa's perfect composure cracked slightly, just a tightening around her eyes, a subtle shift in her posture. Gabriel watched her the way he'd once watched her sleep, except now he was looking for tells, for weaknesses, for the truth beneath the performance. Then came Richard Crane. The old Marine walked to the stand with his back straight, though Gabriel could see the effort it cost him. His testimony was devastating in its simplicity. "My daughter told me about her plan 3 years ago, shortly after their second anniversary. She said Gabriel was performing exactly as expected. That's a direct quote. She showed me projections of what the business would be worth, what her settlement would be. I told her it was wrong, that Gabriel was a good man who loved her. She laughed and said love was a tool, not a destination." "And why didn't you come forward sooner?" Reardon asked. Richard's voice broke. "Because she's my daughter. Because I'm a coward who chose blood over honor. I watched a good man get destroyed by my own child's greed, and I did nothing. I'll have to live with that for whatever time I have left." Vanessa's sister was subpoenaed next but refused to testify, invoking her Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination. The judge noted it for the record, not proof of guilt, but certainly not proof of innocence either. Finally, Reardon played the video. The courtroom fell silent as Vanessa's recorded voice filled the space. Gabriel was always just a stepping stone. When it ended, Judge Harrison removed her glasses and rubbed her eyes. "Mrs. Knight, do you have anything to say?" Vanessa stood, and for a moment Gabriel thought she might actually confess. Instead, she doubled down. "Your Honor, I'm a victim here. My father is ill, being manipulated by my vindictive ex-husband. That video is taken out of context. It was a joke among friends. Dark humor that sounds worse than it was. Gabriel is a controlling man who—" "Enough!" The judge's voice cut through the courtroom like a knife. "I've presided over hundreds of divorce cases, Mrs. Knight. I've seen bitterness, anger, and revenge in many forms. But I have never, in 30 years on the bench, seen evidence of such calculated, premeditated fraud. The ruling came down like a hammer. The original settlement was vacated. All assets were to be returned. Vanessa was ordered to pay Gabriel's legal fees and faced potential criminal charges for fraud. The courtroom erupted. Reporters rushed for the doors. Attorneys whispered furiously, and Vanessa simply sat there, her perfect facade finally crumbling. 3 months later, Gabriel stood in the offices of Knight Security Solutions, looking out over the city skyline. The business had survived barely. The legal fees had been substantial, and the months of distraction had cost them 2 major contracts. But they were rebuilding. Marcus walked in with coffee and a tablet. Thought you'd want to see this. The article was from the State Bar Association's journal, Crane vs. Knight, a landmark case in marital fraud. Legal experts were calling it precedent-setting, a warning shot to anyone considering marriage as a financial strategy rather than an emotional commitment. Several law schools had already added it to their family law curricula. "You're famous," Marcus said with a slight smile. "The man who proved that truth still matters." Gabriel didn't feel famous. He felt exhausted, hollowed out, like a building that had survived a fire but lost everything inside. What about Vanessa? Criminal charges were filed last week. Wire fraud because she used electronic transfers to hide the money. Her attorney is negotiating a plea deal, probably probation and restitution, given that it's a first offense. But her reputation is destroyed. Crane Industries quietly removed her from the board of directors. Society pages that used to feature her at charity events have gone silent. Preparing and narrating this type of story took us long efforts and hard work. So if you are enjoying the story, please consider subscribing to our channel. Gabriel should have felt satisfaction. Instead, he felt nothing, just a vast, empty space where his marriage used to be. And her father? Richard Crane liquidated a significant portion of his portfolio and established a foundation. It's called the Truth in Partnership Fund, provides free legal assistance to victims of marital fraud. He put $15 million into it. I think it's his way of atoning. The irony wasn't lost on Gabriel. The money Vanessa had schemed to access through marriage was now being used to help others avoid her fate. Perhaps that was justice in its own strange way. Over the following weeks, Gabriel slowly rebuilt his life. He hired a new security specialist, landed a contract with a tech startup, and even started sleeping through the night again. The apartment gradually filled with furniture he'd chosen himself, not the expensive designer pieces Vanessa had insisted upon. It was simpler, more comfortable, more him. One evening, Richard Crane called. "I know I have no right to ask, but I'd like to buy you dinner. No agenda, no expectations. Just an old man trying to make amends." They met at a quiet steakhouse in the financial district. Richard looked older, more frail, as if the weight of his guilt had physical mass. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," he said over scotch. "I don't deserve it. But I wanted you to know that my daughter is in therapy, finally. Court-mandated at first, but she's continuing voluntarily. Her therapist says she has narcissistic personality disorder, likely stemming from watching her mother's death and developing a pathological fear of vulnerability." "That doesn't excuse what she did," Gabriel said quietly. "No, it doesn't. But maybe it explains it. And maybe, in time, she'll become the person she pretended to be with. Someone capable of genuine connection." Richard paused, his weathered hands wrapped around his glass. "You deserved better, Gabriel. You deserved the real thing." Gabriel thought about that on the drive home. The real thing. He'd thought he had it, the partnership, the love, the shared future. But it had all been performance. A long con executed with Oscar-worthy precision. How did you trust again after that? How did you believe anything was real? 2 years passed. Knight Security Solutions grew beyond Gabriel's original projections, landing contracts with 3 Fortune 500 companies and expanding into cybersecurity consultation. Marcus became a full partner, and they hired 15 new employees, including a former FBI analyst who revolutionized their threat assessment protocols. Gabriel received occasional updates about Vanessa through mutual acquaintances. She'd moved to Portland, was working in a nonprofit, living modestly. Some said she'd genuinely changed. Others believed it was another performance. Gabriel didn't know which was true, and he'd learned to be okay with that uncertainty. Richard Crane's foundation grew as well, helping over 200 people navigate divorces complicated by fraud, deception, and financial manipulation. The old Marine sent Gabriel an annual report every year, a quiet reminder that good could emerge from even the darkest betrayals. On a crisp October morning, 3 years after that envelope changed everything, Gabriel sat in a coffee shop and watched a woman struggle with an armful of legal documents, a laptop, and a coffee cup that was about to spill. He stood automatically, catching the cup before it fell, helping her gather the scattered papers. "Thank you so much," she said, flustered and laughing. "I'm a disaster before coffee." Her name was Sarah. She was a civil rights attorney, passionate about her work, funny in a self-deprecating way that seemed genuine. They talked for 20 minutes, then 40, then an hour. When she finally had to leave for court, Gabriel found himself asking for her number. "Fair warning," she said with a smile that crinkled the corners of her eyes. "I'm terrible at relationships. I work too much. I'm cynical about romance, and my last boyfriend said I was married to my job." "I can relate," Gabriel said. "My ex-wife was married to my bank account." Sarah laughed. A real laugh, spontaneous and bright. "Okay, that's refreshingly honest. Dinner Friday. Friday works." As he watched her leave, Gabriel felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Hope. Not the naive optimism of his first marriage, but something tempered and resilient, forged in the fire of betrayal and cooled in the waters of truth. He'd learned that trust wasn't about blind faith. It was about paying attention, asking questions, and building something genuine brick by honest brick. His phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. "New client wants a meeting. Major healthcare network. This could be our biggest contract yet." Gabriel smiled, pocketed his phone, and headed back to the office. The past had tried to destroy him, but the future, complicated, uncertain, full of possibility, was still his to build. And this time, he'd build it with his eyes wide open, surrounded by people who'd earned their place in his life through actions, not words. The envelope Richard Crane had given him that day on the courthouse steps had contained devastating truth. But truth, Gabriel had learned, was the only foundation worth building on. Everything else was just performance, destined to crumble under its own weight. He thought of Vanessa sometimes, wondered if she'd truly changed or if she was simply playing a longer game. But those thoughts came less frequently now, with less power to wound. She'd taken his money, his trust, his time, but she hadn't taken his ability to rebuild, to learn, to become someone stronger and wiser than the man who'd signed those marriage documents 12 years ago. Justice, he'd discovered, wasn't always immediate or perfect. But truth had a weight to it, a gravity that eventually pulled everything into its proper orbit. The courts had given him back his assets. Time and work had given him back his business. And slowly, carefully, he was finding his way back to something resembling hope. Friday came. Dinner with Sarah went well. So well they talked until the restaurant staff started stacking chairs around them. She told him about a case she'd won defending a teacher wrongfully terminated. He told her about building night security from nothing, leaving out the Vanessa details for another time, when trust had been earned. "I like this," Sarah said as they walked to their cars. "The honesty, the lack of games." "Games are exhausting," Gabriel agreed. "And I'm too old for them." "You're 38, hardly ancient. 38 with a lifetime of lessons learned." They stood by her car, autumn leaves swirling around them in the streetlight. Sarah looked at him thoughtfully. "Full disclosure, I'm going to be cautious with you. I've been hurt before, and I protect myself maybe more than I should. But I think you're worth the risk of trying." Full disclosure back. "I have significant trust issues from my previous marriage. I work too many hours, and I'll probably need patience while I figure out how to do this right." Sarah smiled. "Sounds like we're perfectly imperfect for each other." 6 months later, night security landed the healthcare contract. A year after that, Sarah moved some of her things into Gabriel's house, the one he'd bought after selling the Oakmont Heights property. Something smaller but genuinely his. They talked about marriage sometimes, but neither was in a hurry. They were building something real, and real things took time. Richard Crane passed away quietly in his sleep 2 years later, the foundation fully endowed and managed by a board of directors committed to his vision. At the funeral, Vanessa approached Gabriel for the first time since the trial. "I'm sorry," she said simply. "No excuses, no explanations. For all of it." Gabriel looked at her, really looked, and saw someone different from the woman he'd married. Whether the change was genuine or another performance, he'd never know for certain. But he'd learned that wasn't his burden to carry. "I hope you find what you're looking for," he said, and he meant it. Life moved forward as it always does. Gabriel and Sarah eventually married in a simple ceremony with close friends and family. Marcus stood as best man, making a toast about trust, truth, and the courage to build something real on the ruins of what was broken. Knight Security Solutions continued to grow, its reputation built on the same foundation Gabriel had learned to value in his personal life. Honesty, transparency, and relationships earned through consistent action rather than hollow words. And sometimes, on quiet evenings, Gabriel would think back to that moment on the courthouse steps. Richard Crane's trembling hands extending an envelope that held the power to destroy or liberate. Truth was a weapon and a tool, devastating and healing in equal measure. What mattered was what you built with it afterward. The past didn't define him anymore. It had shaped him, taught him, forged him into someone stronger and wiser. But the future, that belonged to him, to Sarah, to the life they were building together with eyes wide open and hearts cautiously, carefully committed to something real. In the end, Vanessa had taken his money but given him something more valuable. The knowledge that authentic connection mattered more than any amount of wealth, that trust earned was worth infinitely more than trust assumed, and that the most important foundation anyone could build their life on was truth. Uncomfortable, inconvenient, liberating truth.